Hello and welcome to Decision NYC with Ben Max. I'm Ben Max, your host and the executive editor of Gotham Gazette. The 2021 New York City election season is well underway, and it's poised to be the most significant municipal election in decades. All of city government is on the ballot, and because so few incumbents are eligible to run for their current seats due to term limits, New Yorkers are electing many new office holders this year and the next roster of leadership for our city. There will be a new mayor of New York City elected here in 2021, as well as a new city comptroller, several new borough presidents, and many new city council members. And that's not all that's on the ballot. A number of incumbents are eligible for and seeking re-election, including the city's public advocate. There's a very crowded and competitive race for Manhattan District Attorney, and still more. Party primaries are set for June, and the general election will culminate on November 2nd. This is the first full set of municipal elections that will feature both early voting and the new ranked choice voting system. Ranked choice voting only applies to party primaries and special elections, and we'll have a separate show just on ranked choice voting. This city election cycle will be of enormous importance under more usual circumstances, but it's unfolding at a time of great crisis for our city, raising the stakes of the decisions that you, the voter, will make. The new wave of city leadership will quite clearly make or break the city's recovery from the devastation of the COVID-19 pandemic and its impacts on health, families, jobs, education, housing, and much more. It's also important to note that the city faced a number of immense crises even before the pandemic, and some of those have only worsened. So it's an important time of choosing here in New York City, and we're pleased to bring you this series of interviews with candidates running for citywide offices like mayor, public advocate, comptroller, as well as interviews with candidates for borough president and district attorney and more. These one-on-one conversations will help you get to know the candidates better, learn about their backgrounds, their visions, their platforms for the office they're seeking. We hope this and other interviews will help you sort through your many choices and make an informed decision when it's time to vote. Today, we're focused on the position of New York City Comptroller. The Comptroller is a citywide elected position and considered the city's independently elected chief fiscal officer and budget watchdog. The Comptroller evaluates most city contracts with outside entities, audits city agencies to find waste and inefficiency, makes recommendations and proposals to improve city government, as well as other services that affect New Yorkers. And the comptroller is a fiduciary of the city's 5 public pension funds that are worth approximately $240 billion. So joining me now by Zoom is a candidate for New York City Comptroller, Assemblymember David Weprin, who is running in the Democratic primary. Assemblymember Weprin, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
So I mentioned you're in the state assembly, but tell folks a little bit more about your background, your resume before jumping into this race for city comptroller, and then we'll get to your campaign platform and what you would do as comptroller, but your background a little bit.
Yeah, I was born in Queens. I actually live within a mile of where I grew up today. I've always lived in the Jamaica Hollis area my entire life. My mom, who's going to be 91 in April and has a teacher's pension, is an immigrant from Cuba. She came here at the age of 8, didn't speak English. She went to our public schools and she went to CUNY. She met my father at CUNY. And my father was a local lawyer and, community activist, and became an assembly member, and then rose to be Speaker of the Assembly. And while my mother, as I mentioned, was a public high school teacher. I served, I was a lawyer by training. I served as Deputy Superintendent of Banking during Mario Cuomo's first term in the 80s. And then I went on to a 25-year municipal finance career on Wall Street with major firms, floating bond issues, infrastructure needs to build schools and hospitals. And then I got elected to the city council in 2001 and immediately became chair of the finance committee for 8 years, Mayor Bloomberg's first 2 terms. And we balanced 8 budgets on time without major layoffs and without service cuts.
And then from the city council, you've been in the state assembly. Say a little bit more about the experience you have from the private sector, from the public sector, in terms of what you think most translates to becoming the New York City Comptroller.
Well, the relevant private sector experience where I was involved in municipal finance, an important part of the controller's office. The controller's in charge of debt issuance. I also served as deputy superintendent of banking for 4 years, and I also chaired the Securities Industry Association New York District. All very relevant experience as we deal with investing pension fund monies and hiring the experts who will help out in that area. But I got elected to the state assembly in 2010. I currently chair the corrections committee in the assembly, where we've done a lot of criminal justice reform, including today. We passed out of my committee this morning, a major parole reform bill, which would basically, change the criteria for parole to allow more eligible people to have who have rehabilitated themselves and are no longer dangerous to society, to actually have a chance to integrate into society. I've also been on the Ways and Means Committee in the Assembly most of my years as well. So I think I have significant relevant experience, both public and private sector, specifically for the Office of Controller.
Now, when you look at the New York City Comptroller's office, hundreds of employees, significant budget over $100 million. Talk about sort of the readiness to manage the office, and also, are there significant ways that you think the office should be run differently?
Well, one of the proposals I've been proposing and saying is that we're a 5-borough city. We should be a 5-borough controller office. And I'd like to open up borough offices in all the boroughs. Right now, the only office of the controller is in downtown Manhattan, in the municipal building near City Hall. There's no reason why we can't open up offices in every borough, and I'm committed to that. And I will focus those offices specifically on helping small businesses come back, helping small businesses get the aid that they need, and also providing financial services to many underserved communities.
How does the city comptroller's office help small businesses? What can the comptroller's office do about that?
Well, we can have the people and the resources and places to go to help small businesses. So that's where I'd like to expand the office to specifically do that out of the various boroughs, because we want to have local contact. We want people to be able to easily contact the office and come in, and that would be done through my proposal on borough offices geared towards helping small businesses.
And in terms of other ways the office is run, are there functions of the office that you think need more attention, more resources to be overhauled? Is there anything about the financial investment analysis part? Is there any piece of the audit function that you think needs changing? Are there significant ways that the office has been run, other than opening up these satellite borough offices, that you think needs to either be scrapped, improved greatly, and more resources? Is the audit function handled properly?
Yeah, the city charter requires every city agency to be, or some aspect of every city agency actually, to be audited by the controller's office once every 4 years. As far as I'm concerned, that's not enough. We should be looking to audit every agency, at least once a year, and if otherwise, maybe every year and a half. But we should not wait 4 years to audit a city agency. The other thing that really hasn't been focused on, and I would like to focus through the audit function, is the outside contracting budget of the city of New York. We have a $92 billion city budget, and 19% of that, about $17 billion, are outside contracts from the city of New York, for the city of New York. A lot of those contracts could be done by existing city workers. It could be done, it could help save a lot of money. For example, the Department of Education budget alone outside contracting budget is about $7 billion, or $7 to $8 billion. And a lot of that savings that we could have by looking at closely at some of those contracts can be used to hire more teachers, to hire more guidance counselors, to hire more social workers, which will come in handy as we recover from this pandemic. So I would concentrate the audit function, in addition to traditional city agencies, the outside contracts with those agencies.
What do you think's at the root of why that's a problem? How is the city, including the Department of Education, but elsewhere as well, become so dependent on outside contracting, and how is it possible to return a lot of that work to city government and not need to contract out? What went wrong there, or what's the problem there, and how do we fix it?
Well, it actually started under Mayor Bloomberg when I was in the city council, where I chaired the finance committee, and outside contractors were expanded significantly during the Bloomberg years. And actually, the de Blasio administration even expanded it even further rather than cutting it. So I think it has to really be looked at very carefully. Do we need all of these outside consultants? Do we need all this technology consultants? Isn't this stuff that could be done by existing city employees? So until it's sufficiently audited and examined, we don't really know where we can find savings. But I have to think that when you're dealing with a $17 billion outside contracting budget, as I mentioned, 19% of the overall budget, that we can find a lot of savings and ways to change it.
So that's a good segue into talking about the city's overall fiscal picture. The federal aid, as we're talking, that looks imminent. Additional federal aid looks like it's going to really help the city's COVID-induced budget deficits, at least for the coming fiscal year, for the current fiscal year, for the coming fiscal year. But it's unclear for how long exactly the city will be on stable footing. There's some out-year budget gaps in the $3, $4, $5 billion range, but everything is very fluid right now. What do you think structurally needs to happen in terms of how the city budget is done, how the city budget's designed, costs, revenues? Are there structural changes you think need to be made into how the city approaches its budget in the years to come that you would push for as controller?
The answer is yes. The short answer is no question. We can change. One of the problems, and the controller is very involved in city contracts, and I've heard this over and over again, is that it takes much too long for people to get paid outside contracts, and we have a lot of not-for-profits that provide basically city services. And it's done through outside not-for-profits, but they actually have to lay out the money and often can't afford it. And they often have to wait as much as a year to get paid. There's no reason, there's no excuse for the city of New York to be so lackadaisical about paying their bills. And in the case of not-for-profits that are actually providing basic services for the residents of the city, that has to be a priority. So it really has to be streamlined. The process has to change, and we really have to reduce some of this red tape. So not-for-profits that are contracted with the city to provide basic services and various services for city residents, it has to be streamlined and it has to change.
Mm-hmm. That's obviously, that is a structural approach to contracting, and of course it's also related to managing cash flow, I suppose. Are there things related to overall city spending and reserves, sort of the structure of city government? I'm thinking about things like the city personnel headcount. I'm thinking about things like whether city employees and labor have to contribute to their healthcare premiums, which comes up fairly often, about whether that shift should be made, like state employees have to contribute. Are there other structural things around spending, labor, reserves that you think need to happen going forward?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is bring back small businesses and bring back the economy, before we can talk about anything. As you pointed out, we will be getting substantial federal aid at both the city and state level. You may remember former Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who would do an annual study about how much New York City and New York State contribute to the federal government in taxes versus how much they get back in government services from the federal government. And we were always short by billions every year. Now, I think with Senator Schumer as the majority leader and Democrats controlling the Senate and the House, I think that's going to change. They're going to be much more favorable to aid to New York City, not only in this package, but in future packages. So we certainly have to, stay on top of the spending of that money. But it's certainly, we're certainly in a better position now than we were even a couple of months ago when we were very unsure what was going to be happening, with aid from Washington. But it's certainly something that we're owed. We were the epicenter of the pandemic when it broke. We were hit the hardest early on. So we certainly can use that aid and put it to good use.
Let's shift to another major responsibility of the office, and that's related to helping manage the city's 5 public pension funds. What would you do differently there? Is there a way to improve the office's management there? Do you have any thoughts about trying to streamline the pension funds? There's talk virtually every comptroller election about trying to combine the pension funds. Is there a way that you would try to approach that differently?
Yeah, I would not, you're certainly, it's not like the state controller where you're the sole trustee. You have a seat at the table on all 5 pension boards, but each one is unique. Each one represents different constituencies and has union representation of their members. And of course, the pensioners, are their members or former members or retirees. So I think they have a major stake in how that money is invested, and the people that are going to be who are the retirees or will be the retirees. So I don't recommend combining them. I think each one is unique. I would work and have my office work with all the various trustees for the 5 pension funds, because they each have unique issues. But first and foremost, though, I would take my fiduciary obligation as a fiduciary to try to get the best returns on the assets of all 5 pension funds, and that would be my priority.
Are there strategies that you think are needed to get a better rate of return? And what do you make of the sort of push among many Democrats towards more of an activist investor approach?
Well, look, you as controller, you're one of 3 citywide elected officials. You certainly have a bully pulpit. You can certainly take positions, on various issues. But as the chief financial officer and the fiduciary obligation of the pension, you should really try to get the best returns. And I think diversifying portfolios is important. You certainly should not be overly invested in any one area, and there's no reason why that can't change. And I've also been told that under the current system, it's difficult to move out of different assets and different areas of investments. And I think there's things that we can do to make that easier to move in and out, of different areas in the case of volatility, whether it be in the equity market or the bond market or real estate. So I think the key is diversification and the ability to be able to move between sectors quickly.
The New York City Comptroller has often also utilized this sort of policy shop within the office. We've seen different controllers use it in different ways, but certainly the last couple have put out a lot of policy proposals, a lot of sort of fleshing out an agenda, often as they're gearing up to run for mayor themselves. But is there a way that you would approach certain policy areas that you would look to have as sort of your core issues as controller, other than the sort of basic responsibilities of the job that we've discussed so far in this conversation? Are there other issues that you think are most pressing that you would look for your policy team to address?
Well, look, I'd like to, have more outlook to the various diverse communities in our 5 boroughs. And I've done that as a city council member. I've done that as an assembly member. I'm very proud of the diversity, which is our strength in New York City. And there is an aspect, there is a division in the controller's office that deals with different diverse communities. I would look to use my borough offices to expand on some of that outreach. Certainly, taking positions or policy positions on issues, that's all well and good. But the basic function of the controller's office is some of the issues we've been discussing. But it's the more outreach to our diverse communities in our 5 boroughs is all good, and there's no reason why we can't expand on some of that outreach in the controller's office, just because it hasn't been traditionally done before, and we haven't had offices in every borough. That's no reason why we can't change that. And I'm committed to being involved with every community where we can help in the financial arena.
Obviously, this is a citywide elected position, as you mentioned and I mentioned, and there's politics in this job. It's a political job. It's not an appointed position. It's an elected position. You, as controller, have to decide, as we were just talking about, what issues to weigh in on. You have to decide what you're auditing. You have to make a lot of decisions that have political ramifications. How do you balance the politics of the job with the basic core responsibilities of it? And you're all but certain, if you're elected as a Democratic controller in the heavily Democratic New York City, to be dealing with a Democratic mayor. How do you approach, the politics of intra-party conflict? How tough do you expect to be on the next mayor if you're controller? How do you sort of think about the intersection of politics and the core responsibilities of the job?
Well, there are plenty of times you have to work with the mayor, and I will do that. For example, just the debt issuance function, the long-term capital needs of the city, by law, are equally distributed between the mayor and the controller as executives when it comes to the debt issuance of the city, and that's the public finance function. So they work very closely and have always worked closely together. Going back to my days on Wall Street in the '80s, even where you have to really deal with the staff of the controller's office and the mayor's office through the Department of Budget to do any kind of work on debt issuance and refunding, refinancing the city's debt to save money, doing creative financing, whether it be variable rate financing or other fixed rate financing. So by law, it's the controller and the mayor. They have to work together, and it's important that they do that. But at the same time, there's an important function of the controller to basically have a check on the mayor and the mayor's agencies. And that's where we'll probably disagree a lot. And also, through the audit function, if the audits find things that, should be changed or are creating problems, I'd be happy to take a strong stand disagreeing with the mayor. I mean, you can disagree without being disagreeable, without making it personal, but there's no question that the controller has an important function as a check on whoever the mayor is, and I will take that seriously, as well as working with the mayor when we should be, as in the debt issuance function.
Are there areas of city spending that you're very concerned about right now? For example, under Mayor de Blasio, there's been this massive expansion of the city budget. The revenues supported it, of course, until COVID hit. But the city government expanded greatly, huge additions to the city personnel files. Some of that's come back down in recent years. A lot of the increased spending and personnel went towards his expansion of early childhood education, which is pretty much roundly praised. But there's been a lot of other expanded spending on a variety of agencies and programs. There's also things that are slated coming up, like a huge capital expenditure on new jails, for example. Are there specific agencies, are there specific spending initiatives that you really think need a closer look and perhaps some reining in or reevaluating?
Well, I mean, I think we certainly have to look at that, the Thrive New York program. It's probably $1 billion. I know the mayor's wife, has made it a priority, and she's been in charge of that. But I think that should be, closely looked at, and that's where the audit function can come in. It overlaps with some, existing agencies dealing with people with mental illness. Do we really need a whole separate agency dealing with that? I think that's something that we could look at and save significant amount of money in the budget to try to end some of these overlapping areas in different agencies. So that's one area I would look at. Also, the expansion of homeless shelters and homeless hotel contracts. I think we really need more long-term housing to deal with people who are homeless as opposed to the temporary shelter. And I think a lot of money can be saved in that effort as well. So I certainly would look at that.
And in our last minute here, are there budget strategies that have been used past or present that you think are extremely important to making sure that the city budget does not become too bloated, for lack of a better term? The program to eliminate the gap, for example, that Bill de Blasio was mostly hesitant to use until recently. That was a staple under Mayor Bloomberg. Yeah, is that something you're a proponent of? Are there other sort of measures and strategies that you think are important?
Well, actually, when I was actually part of that, when I was chair of the finance committee during Mayor Bloomberg's first 8 years, and we actually created a healthcare trust fund. The city of New York was not allowed to have a rainy day fund where we could put away money during good times to be used, later on during bad times. What we did, we were able to create a healthcare trust fund, and we added billions of dollars to the healthcare trust fund that we used for retirees' healthcare needs. And then we actually were legally allowed to tap into that to help with multi-billion-dollar deficits during two of our fiscal crises, one right after 9/11 and the other one after 2008 Wall Street recession. So that was something that I was involved in creating, and it was successful. That I think will change when the city is allowed to have a rainy day fund, which it was a referendum that passed. It hasn't fully gone into effect yet, but when it does, that won't be. But that'll be used. But at the same time, I think you need creative ideas like the healthcare trust fund to help, during good times, to help during bad times.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. David Weprin is a Democratic candidate for New York City Comptroller. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Ben. It's been a pleasure to speak to you today.
Same to you. And thank you for watching Decision NYC with Ben Max. Key decisions for New York City voters are coming up in the June primaries and the fall general election. There's a lot on the line for all of us and the future of New York City. I hope this conversation and others are helpful to you as you make your choices. I'm Ben Max. See you next time.